Welcome to the Pitchwerks podcast. I'm Scot MacTaggart. Over the last 20 years, I've been a sales rep, a marketer, a manager, an executive, a consultant, and an advisor. This show is designed to give you access to my list of contacts so that you can learn more about how to present your ideas at work and succeed in your career.
Startups and salespeople, marketers and managers from the Epicast Network in Pittsburgh. It's the Pitchwerks podcast.
No, it's more like we can save money and we can prove it to you because you measure these efficiencies, the energy gains. We can actually reduce your utility bill and you'll see the difference as soon as we apply our technology.
Nice.
And so then they're like, oh, well, I don't believe you, but if you're willing to prove it, then we'll go there.
Hey everybody, it's Scott. It's Wednesday and it's a Pitchwerks podcast. Thanks for tuning in. So this week we've got Dr. Noah Snyder. He's the president and CEO at Interphase Materials. Interphase, well, the product's kind of invisible, but it does a lot of cool stuff. You're going to hear all about it. Young company that has made some long and useful strides. Big contributions to the world. Before I pass you on to the interview, though, I've got to ask you to like the show on Facebook. I know you thought that I was going to ask you to rate and review, but I figured I'd throw a change-up pitch at you. So go on, jump into Facebook, and look for us, Pitchwerks, Pitchwerks, and just click the like button. It is a modest request. And then, guess what? You're going to get all of our show art and all the cool stuff that happens every single week automatically. Do that for me, and I will appreciate it forever and ever. Let's talk to Noah. Interphase Materials doing some interesting things with technology as it meets with biology. I think you're going to like this. Yeah, that's right. I'm doing it to you again. Another materials startup, but you know what? We're doing the hard thing. Dr. Noah Snyder sitting across from me here in the Pitchwerks podcast studios. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's really great to be here.
Man, I'm glad to have you. I have a well-documented, I'm loath to call it a fetish for materials startups because it sounds a little gross, but you know what? I'm right on the bubble. Like I'm right there on the boat. It's almost a problem.
And there's a lot of people that would say that you're interested in materials, products or companies, then maybe you should just do something else because it's so hard compared to a lot of the other types of ideas and startups out there.
It is, from my viewpoint, which I'm not even going to get into the bit where you had to study the science of this. I'm just talking about the actually making a business from it. Let's start off so everybody understands what you do. How, and I understand you're into a lot of different places now, DOD work, DOE work, like all these kinds of things, but tell me what's the sort of like core of Interphase Materials?
Yeah, so Interphase Materials is, as you mentioned, an advanced materials company. And so we make specialized products that change the way the surface reacts to the environment. And we particularly focus on ways that biology would interact with technology.
That's awesome.
So that might be something from a medical implant that's rejecting, the host tissue, or the host tissue is rejecting the medical implant.
Yeah.
Or a cooling system on a ship that's getting clogged with barnacles. Like all these kind of advanced technologies that man's been making for a long, long time now.
Yeah.
We put it out in the world and inevitably it fails because it wasn't supposed to be there. And so we're using advanced materials and technologies to make that interface more seamless and make it so that you can create a technology that lives in the world or maybe even lives in the human body and works for a long time.
So just from a pure fascination perspective, right? Is a cochlear implant a good example for you?
That's an awesome example. So when I was in grad school, I was doing my PhD, I was really, I was drawn to Pitt because they have an awesome neural engineering program. And so that's all about interfacing with brain tissue to record electronic signals and use those signals to control a device. So you can imagine if you were paralyzed or if you were deaf, a lot of your brain tissue is still there and it's awful because you're trapped. You don't have the function you want, the function you're used to, but your brain's still operating normal.
So a cochlear implant, that's going actually into the sensory tissue in your brain, and you're introducing this foreign matter into a place where it's really, even if it's good for your hearing, it's good for your body in the long run. The subtle biology doesn't understand that and tries to fight it off. Exactly.
And brain tissue of all tissues are the most delicate. So you imagine basically just, shoving something into your brain and expecting it to work. And, that's the real problem. And so I was drawn to solving that problem because for me, it's, I'd went through all of my education to that point and college, all about, how can we, use technologies and help people make things better. I was really fortunate. I didn't have a lot of those kind of medical problems or issues, but, every time I saw somebody, I thought like, hey, maybe it's arrogant or naive. I feel like maybe there's a chance that I can do something to help those people.
I don't think that's arrogant or anything. I think it's if everyone takes the opinion that it can't be done, then how's it ever going to get done?
Yeah.
Right. You know, I mean, the first step is showing up.
Right.
Right. And one of the things I've noticed, it just, you know, you've appeared in articles and, you know, you've done other interviews and whatnot. One of the things that interests me about, you know, your attitude and your general sort of point of view is the fact that you're very connected to the outcome. And that is a compliment. I mean, it doesn't sound so much like one because it sounds a little too long and verbose. So let me say it a different way. You once made a comment that you didn't want to sell a company that did this because you were afraid that it was going to keep the tech from getting into the hands of the people that needed it, right? And I'd like you to expand on that. Like, where does that come from for you?
Yeah, I think you know, I was always very, I guess, mission driven to what I wanted to do. You know,
Yeah.
A lot of why I went into kind of neuroscience and physics was because I wanted to solve these problems, and it was very much about, you know, solving problems for people to make an impact. And I think, you know, telling kind of a personal story. I remember, you know, in graduate school, I was, you know, working on all this science and research, some really cool stuff about, you know, solving some of these problems. But I remember towards the end of the career, I realized that staying in the academic pathway, while very important, building that foundational information, I found myself focusing on creating technologies that would end up in an academic paper that might not actually ever get there. And I remember, you know, that's probably the most depressed I've really ever been, you know, like, because that was my mission for, you know, 28 years. I think, you know, I had a lot of friends in college, you know, going out, doing a lot of different things. And I was kind of studying and focusing, trying to solve this problem. And I think at that point in time when I realized maybe I wasn't going to make an impact the way that I thought, it was awful. And so because of that, you know, I was really driven when I realized that maybe we could start a company and do this on our own and kind of go a different path to solving these problems and making an impact. And part of that was that, you know, the whole reason I was so depressed was that I wasn't going to make an impact in that previous kind of
you had no
career.
faith that somebody was going to pick it up where you left it and understand it. Is that fair?
Yeah, and I think that it's the hard part. It's hard making something and developing an idea. And it's even harder then to try to get that idea across the finish line.
Yes. It's the game of telephone, right?
Yeah.
You said something and you're hoping the next person hears it correctly when they pick it up and run with it. And you're going, I don't know if I have enough faith that is going to happen. And it was really important to me to get that message written in the first place.
Right.
Yeah, I get that. There's a big jump though between the biocide and the barnacles on a ship, right?
Yeah.
Like, how does that happen?
Yeah, I mean, you'd think so. It's funny because, you know, now when we talk about interphase materials, a lot of the times we just say, you know, for now we're focusing on improving the efficiency of large cooling systems for anything from, you know, boats to power plants to buildings. But that's just how we, again, package kind of the value to customers or people that are interested. But at the heart of it, we're still a biomaterials company.
Yeah.
And so you think of, you know, the issues between, you know, mismatch and something you're implanting to the brain and human tissue, that's a biological, technological mismatch.
Yes.
The same thing happens when you put a boat on water and you've got all these barnacles growing on something that just attaches it. And for a long time, it's funny, I always tell the story, the standard way for, you know, solving the bio problem on the industrial side was, hey, there's something growing on my boat. How do we kill it?
Right.
And so, you know,
I was going to say bleach. Bleach seems to be the answer like 98% of the time.
You know,
fire's the other two.
Well, that's, you know, the Vikings used to put tar and brimstone, you know, basically on their boats. And so, you know, then in like the early 20s, chemical engineering was increasing. And so like, oh, we'll put cyanide on our boats. I'm like, okay. You know,
I didn't know that.
Yeah. People stepped in and said, well, you shouldn't do that. I was like, well, we'll put some tin and leach some like heavy metals into the water. And
that's
they're like, okay, maybe
fantastic.
that's better. And then we realized that's also bad. And
this is a history I need to read up on.
Yeah. And so like now they've switched over to different types of like toxic chemicals that are, you know, designed to kill stuff nearby. And so, you know, when we started our company, we were, again, looking on the medical side. And similarly, I didn't want to raise a lot of money because to me, that's also, you're writing your epitaph, you know, like your tombstone basically at that point in time. Like if you're going to the VC money, like a lot of early entrepreneurs don't realize like, you know, they want something and they don't want it to happen in 30 or 40 years.
Right.
And so, you know, we thought to ourselves creatively, all right, one of the missions, one of the outcomes, we want to help people on the medical side, but we need to control this company so we can do it our way and we can get that technology out there. And so we thought, well, what other biomaterials problems are there outside of the medical world?
Yeah.
And so we saw on the industrial side all these, chemically engineered kind of toxic methods for killing stuff. And we thought, we were working on something to prevent that type of bioresponse inside the brain in a safe way. So we thought, let's use kind of our goals and our missions of, creating a technology that is improving the interface, not trying to kill something, not trying to use any types of toxic materials, but improve that interface, solve the problem, and still go back to our mission, and maybe someday then using that same technology, building up our business, and then getting it back to the medical side as well, which is still really a focus of ours.
So you mentioned like what it's like being an entrepreneur and knowing that you need other people's money, right? And that's a fascinating aspect of this for me, because you are a successful business now in the sense that you've crossed that first valley that people, a lot of times their company fails in, which is how do we get to the point where we can actually, we have the presence to even sit in a room with, say, the Department of Energy, and pass their sniff test, right? Because they don't want to work with somebody who's going to go belly up in 6 months. You had to get backers on board, which means their priorities become your priorities, and also carry out this mission. How does a materials startup talk to investors? How do you make that make sense for them in that short time frame that you're referring to?
Well, and I think it's the same thing. It's, finding the right investors for sure. I think, again, we knew pretty early on that we didn't necessarily want to go down the traditional investment route, but we knew that we still needed help. You can't do this, can't do any of this stuff for free. We were really fortunate to come out of Alpha Lab Gear and Innovation Works and had some initial funding, but we had a lot of people approaching us, like, hey, well, we're going to give you some money and we're going to help you, go build this company this way. And
is there a special class for people that like a class of investors that look for these types of companies?
Yeah. So angel investors are the best. So
right.
Like angel investors are people that, obviously they want to see the economic improvement, but they actually care about what's going on. And so,
but I mean, materials angels.
There are very few. So
that's what I figured.
Yeah. So there are some out there that, even in this area, like a failure in the material side just sets back kind of investment in that, that market segment, several years. And so, because it's not a quick turnaround, you have to think about all of the issues of how do you manufacture this stuff? How do you get it out there? How do you distribute it? All of these issues that you don't face on the software side. So you have to find people, and it's nice because you have to find people that care about what you're doing. And honestly, I think too many young entrepreneurs don't do that. They find the people that will give them money, but don't necessarily care about, the founders or don't care about maybe the mission of it. And we told several investors, even that were interested in the materials side, that like, hey, we're not trying to flip this company in 2 years.
Yeah.
We want to build this thing. We want to grow this thing. And if you want to support us, let's do this. But, having that honest discussion was great because we weeded out the individuals. And now we've got a great group of angel investors that helped us early on that, they do care about the product. They care about the mission. They care about us. And, and I think that's the importance of finding, really smart, money to support your business.
But when you were getting started, how old were you?
It's a good question. So I think I was 26.
Easy to be scared at 26. Yeah. That's my point. Right?
Yeah.
It's real easy to take in the world of possibility here and skip a beat, right? Like, or the other is it's nice if you can be blessed with the right kind of ignorance that you don't understand how much you just bit off.
So I was finishing up my graduate degree at Pitt. And so you can imagine, as I mentioned at the beginning, I was, again, not to say anything bad about like grad school, the academic route, and like that's really important, obviously.
No, I get
it. For me, it was very like depressing at that point in time. And I met one of my best mentors, Babs Carrier, which if you're in the entrepreneur
everybody
scene,
knows Babs.
Everybody knows Babs. So, and I love this story because at the point in time when I was 26 or so, and I was like, all right, well, I don't want to be a professor. I guess maybe I'll just sell out and, go join a big company and make a lot of money. And so at least I'll be unhappy and rich. So,
you're not the only one doing that math.
Right.
I mean, don't give yourself too hard of a time on that.
So Babs, she sat me down. She says, well, you've got this entrepreneurial stuff going on. Maybe you can help me TA some classes. And she's like, well, you never know. Maybe you'll be like a C-level position at a company sometime. And I remember like, I went home that night and I called my mom. I was like, there's some crazy lady thinking I can be like a C-level position. But I think it was having that mentor kind of starting to push you in that direction.
Yeah.
And then when I realized and started getting a lot of the education at Pitt, and then after that at Alpha Lab Gear, that this was the exact thing I had always been looking for, some way to make an impact, some way to take those ideas and to see it through the whole way. It's really like, it's kind of like, I guess it's like having a kid and making sure they get the whole way and, grown up and get out there, as opposed to, just throwing ideas left and right and just hoping they get there.
It's a long cumulative process. Yeah, absolutely. Now, the first pitch you ever gave to a real life customer, take me back. What happened?
This is this is a great story. So, obviously when we got started at Pitt, we were working on the medical side, and we were talking about dental implants because it's, all about like improving, dental implants so they don't get a bunch of scar tissue and get rejected.
Yeah.
And so we talk to dentists all the time. And so dentists love to geek out about their technology, right? Mm-hmm. They love it. So we would show up in a nice outfit, a shirt and tie, and I'd have business cards and I'd give it to them, and they talk to us for like an hour or so. But when we like really spun out as Interphase Materials and we need to talk to customers, we knew the importance of customer discovery. Talk to them, learn as much as possible. Yeah. And I was a little bit kind of like, feeling ourselves a little bit, like, hey, we know how to do customer discovery. Yeah. We're going to go talk to some people.
I remember the swagger of 26.
Yeah. I was like, this is going to be easy. I'm going to be selling stuff.
I miss the swagger of 26.
And so we're like, all right, we're going to, at the time we were focusing on technologies and coatings for the outside of boats to keep barnacles from fouling on those sides. And so we're like, we'll go to a marina, talk to some boat guys, and learn about what they need. And so I remember, got my nice clothes on, a shirt and tie. You can kind of see where this is going. Business cards. Yep. So we walk down to the Fox Chapel Marina.
Nice.
And there's a guy, and I walk up to him. He turns over, and on his shoulder, he's got this big 2x4. Yeah. His shirt's buttoned down pretty far. He's got, chest hair bursting out. He looks at me. He sees me with my, hand outreached with a card, and he just goes, "Kid, why are you wasting my time? Get out of here." And I realized, like, okay, maybe we didn't know everything about customer discovery. Like maybe we need to learn how to talk to like all the customers. And so I was in Alpha Lab Gear and I was thinking about it. And about 2 or 3 weeks later, I went back to that same marina, but I had, flip-flops on and I had, like a polo on. And I was like, "Hey, Yin's got any of that paint to keep any of those barnacles off your boats?" And the guy talks to me for 3 hours. He's like, "You got this paint, but if you have this type of boat, you need to worry about all this kind of stuff." And it was an important lesson because I realized that, it's not just what you say to customers or what you show customers, but it's how you say to them, how you can connect to them. And that's the important part, especially with coming back full circle to advanced materials. You are in this issue where investors think of advanced materials in one way, and customers, a lot of the times, are end users. And so they may not be chemists themselves. Mm-hmm. And then you're also a technologist, with your graduate degree, maybe like PhD, like the science, the technology. And you have to find a way to package the value for the investors, describe it in a simple, non-arrogant way to like a customer, right, so that everybody really sees the value of it. And I think that was a really important lesson for me to understand. Like it doesn't, you have to be able to connect with people. Because again, just like anything in an entrepreneurial like ecosystem, it is about connecting with people, and customers are obviously some of the most important people you need to connect with. You want a business.
Felt like a lie though, didn't it? A little bit. In
some degree, yeah, because I think I remember early on when we were working on our elevator pitch, I was thinking it's like, it's this advanced, nanotechnology that will improve like
which
this
is
kind
you
of resistance.
Talking out of your voice.
Yeah. And they're like, no, you need to say something else. I'm like, well, that's what it is. Like, well, call it a coating or say it does this, or it keeps junk off of boats.
This is the nature of the fake it till you make it advice, right? The nature of it is what they're saying is like, it's not really a lie if what you're trying to do is take yourself out of the equation convincingly, right? And this is a really interesting ethical question that has always existed around this space. It's like, be like your customer is a piece of advice you get, or talk at a level that your customer doesn't have to ask more questions than necessary. Like all of these different things, but you're the one who has to say it. And then it kind of feels like I'm playing a role instead of I'm me. And over the next maybe 10 years, you're trying to graft those two personalities together so that it really is an authentic thing when people talk to you.
Well, and I think the best way to do it and to stay, authentic is that with a customer, you start with the outcome. And that goes back to why I was excited about it, is that we almost have morphed, especially on the engineering side, as almost an efficiency company. So our technology has all these really interesting fundamental things that happen at the surface. But frankly, the customers of a building want to know like, hey, our buildings are going to be more efficient because of your nano system on our cooling systems. Like they maybe don't care. We'll go back and describe it to them, but we don't come in the door knocking on our saying like we've got this really great nanotechnology. We say we can save money.
Would you like to buy some materials today?
Yeah, exactly. It's more like we can save money and we can prove it to you because you measure these efficiencies, the energy gains. We can actually reduce your utility bill, and you'll see the difference as soon as we apply our technology.
Nice.
And so then they're like, oh, well, I don't believe you. But if you're willing to prove it, then we'll go there. So now we can work with our customers, prove it to them as they see it, and then start answering some of the more technical questions. So now it's almost like the technology is just kind of a quiver in our arrow, and it's really just more so the outcome that we sell. And that's nice because we are very authentic. That's what we do. There's nothing different about that.
One of the reasons that it's interesting to tear this apart is because you've got the benefit of hindsight now, right? Like we had Arieka, the people who make Thubber in here, probably, I don't know, 2-3 months ago now. And not that your experience is the same as what theirs would be, right? But it's interesting to sort of ask you like what they should be thinking and what they should watch out for, right? And again, your mileage will vary, but I think what I'm hearing you say is sort of like listen to your mentors, right? And then find a way to explain outcomes when you're working in the materials business. And maybe a smidge of know what your true north is, like always come back to, for you, it's bio and technology interface stuff, right? Those recipe ingredients didn't come to you for free and they didn't come easy, right? But everybody who comes after you hopefully gets to hear you say, like, this is how you make the world better.
Yeah. No, I think it's so important. And a lot of my answers to the advice I give entrepreneurs always end up sounding kind of the same because for me, it does go towards, you mentioned that true north where it's, understanding your mission, because a lot of times what happens with young entrepreneurs is that they get addicted to that word pivot. We hear pivot all the time, right? Pivot. You've got a problem, we got to pivot. But what doesn't get paired with that is that you have to pivot within that guiding kind of true north like light.
Yeah. Where
too often, I'll hear a story where somebody starts off designing a technology to maybe improve hospitals and, they thought of that like, I'm going to make an impact. And then, well, there's some issues with regulatory. And so next thing you know, they're becoming successful, but they're working on a technology that maybe is just, going towards like the insurance side. And they're like, I don't know why I'm doing this anymore. It's because they're making these decisions and they're pivoting, but not thinking back to why they got started in the first place.
Right. It's not so much customer assistance anymore. It's survival.
Right.
Like the company has now exceeded the customer in terms of priority. And yeah, I see where you're coming from.
Yeah.
there.
And so I think sometimes it's, it's better to, think about ways that, don't pivot to the first thing you can think of. Make sure that matches up and aligns with why you're really driven, because that's where your passion is going to come from. Because those same entrepreneurs that maybe pivot away from why they really got attracted to the idea in the first place, all of a sudden aren't happy. And it's, one of those things, is it better to be kind of unhappy chasing something that you don't care about anymore? Is it better to maybe there's a chance you're going to fail, but it's for something you kind of love?
You've got a unique perspective on this question, because you didn't start out wanting to be an entrepreneur. You started off with a specific thing you were trying to contribute to the world.
Right.
So do you ever feel uncomfortable in that room when you feel like you're surrounded with a bunch of people who are just in love with entrepreneurship?
It's funny, and I love, obviously, the whole ecosystem at Pittsburgh, but people that know me know one thing very clearly about like what I think. Like, I hate the word startup. I don't use it. I don't call us a startup. I never think about it, because there is this atmosphere around it where it's very much driven by like, hey, how can I be successful and get a lot of VC money? It's like, no, that's not what this is about. Like, how can we
be attractive to the people that I'm trying to be attractive to? I guarantee you it's fashion.
Yeah, and we can sell out and we can make a lot of money and we can do all these things. And my problem there is that a lot of the times when you do that, I divide it. There's when you have an idea, you can either extract value out of that idea or you can create value. And what I mean by extracting value is that, you can get an idea, you can get a lot of VC money, and you can get a big company to buy that technology, keep that patent on the shelf somewhere, and never use it. You've extracted a lot of money and a lot of value out of that idea, but you haven't created anything.
Yeah.
And what I always wanted to do is to make sure that we were actually creating value. So taking that idea, nurturing it, building a business, getting employees, making impact on the region.
I'm in a unique place where by connecting these two things that like I studied or I have access to or whatever, I can make more than the sum of the parts.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool when it can happen, but it's hard to relate to people because every business is different.
Right.
So you say it as a goal,
Yeah.
but it's hard to show people how to do it.
Yeah, and I think part of it is just kind of, measuring impact too, like seeing it. It doesn't have to be, materials companies or what we do, we can measure impact and it's really great, but everybody can measure impact. And if your impact is maybe only making you rich, like, all right, maybe you want to do that. That's fine, I guess, but if you're telling people you want to make an impact, like how are you going to do it? Is it, are you making it so people can, use public transportation better? It doesn't have to be the great idea, but it still has to be, what is the impact? How are you changing people's lives? How are you making where we are today better? And I think that's important.
So one thing that's interesting to me is the fact that when you look at Silicon Valley, it's like the headquarters of software, right?
Yeah.
It's like, this is where you go when you're a good developer and you want a good job. New York is where you go when you want to be in the financial space. Am I right in believing that Pittsburgh is where you go when you want to be serious about materials? Because it feels like that could be true with Alcoa and Covestro and Koppers and all Kennametal, all these different companies, right? Yeah. And you're right there in the middle of it.
Yeah, and you think obviously PPG Building and PPG.
Oh, I forgot about PPG.
It's
That's a great one.
It's one of the bigger companies around, right?
Silent.
And we always forget about it because again, they're not out there kind of pitching their technology and their ideas.
I believe they're the world's largest auto paint manufacturer now.
Yeah, they're one of the biggest coating companies in the world. So, and you think about name 10 things that you own that doesn't have a coating technology on it. Probably not many you can name.
I'm not smart enough to even know that.
So it's one of those things where obviously the history, we're all very proud of kind of this region, the steel and everything, but with that history of steel came this history of, well, how do we protect it? How do we treat it? How do we make it work better? And so while we're not making a lot of steel, this area has become kind of the mecca for material science. Like you mentioned, PPG, Covestro, Sherwin-Williams, Valspar. If they weren't founded and headquartered here, they at least have a huge presence here. And so it's funny, I laugh, people are like, oh, you're seeing some success. You want to go out to San Francisco? I'm like, man, all of our mentors and
because software is what I do. Well, again, we're back to not everybody can grasp what you do.
Yeah.
They want to hear that you made a new kind of blender.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, for sure.
And I said this to you earlier. I always admired the BASF campaign where they said, we don't make the skis, we make the skis faster. We don't make the whatever, we make it better. Like, it was the first and maybe only time I've ever seen in a mass media kind of a way, a materials company give just an undeniable argument for its purpose of existence, and it's easier when you're saying steel because they're like, oh, you know what steel is.
Yeah.
It's harder when you're saying, well, you can't see it.
Yeah. Well, and I always joke that early on, it feels like you're a snake oil salesman at first because, like you mentioned, you can make a new widget or a new car and somebody sees like, oh, that's a new car. I've got a car. I understand that. But when you're saying like, I've got this new chemical and it's going to make things better, first off, people don't respond well to the word chemical, even though everything is a chemical.
Yeah.
Secondly, if they don't see it, it just becomes as like, oh, you're just pulling my chain. Because, honestly, I mean, there's a lot of history behind that, right? There's a lot of people selling stuff that doesn't actually do anything. And so we got focused on also connecting the value with our customers too, and saying like, all right, we're not going to be a snake oil salesman. How do we redo this? Like, okay, we'll sell them on what the impact is. Just like you said, BASF's making the skis better. We're going to make your cooling systems better. We're going to make your buildings run more efficiently. Your engines work more efficiently. And they're like, okay, well, that's something I care about and I want. Yeah. How are you going to do it? And it's like, well, once they ask how you're going to do it, we're in, because clearly we've shown there's interest and we believe in our technology and our team. And so then it's into execution mode. Then it's like, all right, they buy in to the concept that they need this. Now let's show them why they have to have it.
Yeah. I laugh when you use the term snake oil salesman, right? Because on the one hand, I get it, right? Like on the one hand, I understand where there was like this traveling carnival, sort of like and I will chase out the evil vapors, right? But on the other hand, the testing, the certification, like especially if it's going to be something where you could have liability in the future, right? you've got to register with, say, I don't know, Underwriters Laboratories, and then you got to register with your insurance company who's agreeing to take on the liability of a company that's going to touch everything, right? Yeah. It's very difficult at this point to believe that anyone can think about the snake oil angle anymore for more than 2 seconds because of how many people have tried to disprove your claims before you ever had the ability to get a marketing department together.
Yeah. It's been one of the things that was beneficial for us was that when we got started pretty early on, we got a small business contract with the Navy.
Nice.
To work on some of the cooling systems on some of those, like some of their vessels. And
I understand they're really good to work with.
Yeah. It's funny because I think that if you had been around as a business for 5 years or 10 years and then went back to working with the Navy or the DoD, it'd be a really big, it'd be very challenging. Mm-hmm. For us, we got our contract in that first year. And so it was kind of it helped us build a more sophisticated, more mature company, yes, which is what we wanted. We didn't want kind of the startup kind of, loose kind of structure. We wanted to understand how do we have to operate like a business? And when you're working with the Navy, you have to operate like a business.
But they do coach you. They say, like, this is how you work with us. And that's what I've heard, is that they understand that, they're usually the only people who have a team of people trying to improve cooling systems.
Yeah.
The typical corporate client needs to be convinced. Meanwhile, the Navy already did the research before you even knew that there was a program for small businesses.
Well, and it's really great because when you're talking with them, they obviously care. And so that's the important part. That's actually, honestly, when we're looking for customers, whether it's on the building side or power plant side, one of the first things we found now is that, like, early in our decision tree, we say, does this customer care about what we're trying to do? Because we found that, honestly, it's just like saying no to bad investment money. You can say no to bad customers as well. Like, if this person doesn't care about what you're doing, that's not going to be a good relationship. And when you're in kind of an engineering company like us, you have to be built on relationships. So you have to work with customers that care about what you're doing, because then you're fighting together to solve a problem, as opposed to, if they don't care, then it's like, I'm constantly trying to prove myself. I'm constantly trying to show them that this works. And you're never going to win that battle because they don't care.
Well, it's a leadership problem at that point, right? If whatever the leaders believe tends to become true, even if it's not, right? It tends to become like, we've all seen that person who leadership thought wasn't very good, so they didn't support them. And then they failed. They're like, see, I told you that person wasn't very good. It's like, well, is that a chicken or an egg? I'm not exactly sure. Noah Snyder, Interphase Materials. I appreciate the time, man.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was great.
All right, that's all the time we've got. Thank you to Noah and everybody over at Interphase Materials. Find them at interphasematerials.com if you're looking for them on the internet. And make sure you subscribe to this fine program in your favorite podcast app. That way, every Wednesday morning, you will get the show like immediately, like super early, and you can listen on your way into work.
The Pitchwerks podcast comes to you from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a production of the Epicast Network and MacTaggart, LLC. Engineering and production by Buzzy Torek and Nick Miller. For more information, show feedback, and ad sales, visit pitchwerks.com. pitchwerks.com. On social media, find and follow the show on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram using that same brand name, pitchwerks.